They arrived under the dim veil of dawn when the world was still half asleep, and the desert's breath whispered secrets of centuries past. The air was heavy, not with dust, but with something unexplainable. The kind of stillness that presses on your chest, that makes you feel both watched and called. Judge Judy stood silently beside King Charles, their eyes fixed on the horizon, where the first light kissed the golden edges of Mecca. It wasn't a royal visit nor a political journey. It was something deeper, something neither of them could explain. The world didn't know why they had come. The palace had no statement, and the media was left with empty speculation. But those who saw them walk through the ancient gates of the holy city that morning swore they looked haunted. King Charles' steps were slow, deliberate, his face carved with lines of both exhaustion and wonder. Judy's usual sharp gaze was softer now, but there was a storm behind her eyes, one that had nothing to do with judgment and everything to do with revelation. As the call to prayer echoed across the desert, something inside them both shifted. They weren't here to observe. They were here to face something that had been following them for years. The king looked at the sea of pilgrims circling the Kaaba, thousands of souls moving as one, their voices rising in unity. For a man raised in power and privilege in centuries of tradition, the sight was almost unbearable. Each chant seemed to strip away the layers of royal pride, revealing something raw beneath. He lowered his head. For once, the crown meant nothing. Judy watched him, her mind tangled with memories of courtrooms, of verdicts, of a lifetime of believing she knew truth and justice. But standing here, she felt something she never had before, insignificance, the kind that humbles even the strongest heart. She remembered the woman she once sentenced who had whispered before leaving the courtroom, "You'll understand one day when the truth finds you." And now, standing in Mecca, Judy felt that whisper again, like a ghost brushing her shoulder. The night before their arrival, a sandstorm had swept across the desert, fierce and blinding, like nature warning them of what was to come. Their convoy had been forced to stop. As the wind howled, Charles had seen something in the distance, a lone figure walking through the storm, barefoot, unmoved by the chaos. He thought it was an illusion until Judy saw it too. The figure vanished as quickly as it appeared. But neither spoke about it again. Now, as the king's eyes met Judy's across the marble courtyard, he knew she remembered. The imam guiding them noticed their innies. "Every soul that comes here," he said quietly, "comes because it was called. Some resist that call their whole lives, but it never stops calling." Charles looked toward the Kaaba again, his heart pounding. For the first time he felt fear, not of death, not of scandal, but of truth. The kind of truth that demands surrender. Later that night, after the city had gone silent, they found themselves walking through narrow alleys lit by flickering lanterns. The sound of distant prayers drifted through the air. Judy stopped suddenly. There, carved into the wall beside them, were markings old worn but still legible. She ran her hand across them, tracing the shapes with trembling fingers. Names, the imam said softly from behind them. Names of those who came seeking forgiveness. Some never returned, and Charles felt the weight of history pressing down on him. He thought of his ancestors, of wars fought in the name of faith, of kingdoms built on the bones of belief. And now, here he stood, just a man stripped of his titles, facing the quiet power of something far older than any crown. A tear slipped down his face, though he didn't notice. Judy did. And for the first time, she didn't think of verdicts or justice, only mercy. The next morning, they joined the thousands in white garments, blending into the tide of humanity. Cameras were forbidden, but even if they had been allowed, no lens could have captured what unfolded. As Charles lifted his hands in prayer, his voice cracked. Judy stood beside him, whispering words she didn't understand, but somehow felt deeply. When the final prayer ended, the imam turned to them. "You came as witnesses," he said, "but perhaps you were the ones meant to be witnessed." The king looked up, confusion in his eyes. Witnessed by whom? The imam smiled faintly. By the one who sees all, even kings and judges. That night, as they prepared to leave, neither spoke much. The silence between them wasn't cold. It was sacred. On the flight back, Judy looked out the window at the endless stretch of desert beneath them. "Did you feel it?" she asked quietly. Charles nodded. "I did, and I fear I'll never be the same." He paused, his voice trembling. "Do you think they'll ever believe us?" Judy turned to him, her expression unreadable. "They don't have to. Some things aren't meant to be explained, only lived." As the plane ascended through the clouds, the last rays of the setting sun painted the sky in gold and crimson, the same colors that had greeted them at dawn. Somewhere far below, the call to prayer rose once more, echoing through the desert, soft, haunting, eternal. And in that moment, both of them understood they hadn't gone to Mecca to witness history. They had gone there to meet their souls. The engines of the plane hummed softly, a distant lullaby to the thoughts neither of them could silence. The world beneath them shrank into shadow as night claimed the desert once more. Judge Judy stared into the darkness, watching the faint glimmers of distant cities fade like dying embers. King Charles sat beside her, hands clasped tightly, his knuckles pale under the dim cabin light. Hours passed, but neither slept. What they had seen in Mecca refused to fade from their minds. The call to prayer still echoed in their ears, ghostly and tender. But there was something else, something that hadn't left with them. It followed, quietly, invisibly. When they landed back in London, the air felt heavier. The usual rush of cameras and reporters was gone. No one knew they had returned that night. Only a handful of people had even known they'd left. But as they stepped into the cold fog of Heathrow, both could feel it. The strange stillness that comes before a storm. The drive to Buckingham Palace was silent. The city's lights blurred past. But Charles barely saw them. His thoughts were elsewhere. in the sound of thousands of voices rising in unison, in the tear-streaked faces of strangers who somehow seemed to know him, to see him beyond the crown. Judy noticed the way he kept touching his chest as if something burned beneath his ribs. "Are you all right?" she finally asked. He didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on something only he could see. That night, the palace felt different, colder. The portraits on the walls seemed to stare longer than before, their painted eyes filled with something that resembled judgment. Charles walked through the corridor slowly, each step echoing like a verdict. When he reached his private chamber, he paused. The door was slightly open. Inside, the fireplace was lit, though he hadn't ordered it. The flames danced wildly, their shadows twisting across the ceiling. He stepped closer, noticing something on the mantel. A book, old, leather-bound, the edges burned slightly as if it had survived a fire long ago. He picked it up carefully. Inside, there were verses not in English but in Arabic, yet somehow he understood them. The words spoke of mercy, of justice, of kings brought to their knees before truth. He closed the book quickly. His heart pounded. The next morning, Judy received a call from the palace. Charles had requested her presence immediately. She arrived within the hour, her instincts whispering that something had changed. When she saw him, she knew she was right. The king looked pale, almost translucent, as if sleep had abandoned him entirely. "There's something you need to see," he said, voice low and strained. He led her to the royal library, where the book lay open on a marble table. "I found it last night," he murmured, "or maybe it found me." Judy approached cautiously. The same Arabic script lined the pages, but now beside the text, there were faint English translations, ones that hadn't been there before. The ink looked fresh. She read the words slowly. "He who wears the crown must answer not to the people, but to the truth that sees through kings." Her breath caught. Charles, who wrote this, he looked at her with hollow eyes, no one alive. Over the next few days, strange things began happening in the palace. The clocks would stop at the same hour every night. 3:07 a.m. Servants whispered of footsteps echoing in empty halls. One maid claimed she saw the king standing in the chapel at midnight, speaking to someone who wasn't there. And always there was that sound, faint, distant, like the murmur of prayer carried on the wind. Judy returned one evening after another sleepless night. "You need rest," she said gently. "You're seeing patterns and shadows." Charles turned toward her, his face illuminated by candlelight. "Then why do you hear it too?" But she froze. Because she did. Every night since Mecca, when the world grew silent, she had heard it, that same haunting call. Not loud, not near, but always there, lingering just beyond understanding. One night, unable to bear it any longer, they returned to the palace chapel together. The air inside was heavy still. The stained glass windows glowed faintly under the moonlight. Charles walked to the altar, the mysterious book in his hands. "I think this was meant for us," he said, "for both of us." Before Judy could respond, the candles flickered, the room darkened. And then the sound, that same low rhythmic hum, filled the space again. But this time it wasn't distant. It was inside the chapel. Surrounding them, Charles dropped the book onto the altar. The pages fluttered open, revealing new lines that neither had seen before. "The ones who witness shall carry the weight of remembrance. The truth demands its keepers." Judy's voice trembled. "What does it mean?" He didn't answer. He just stared at the words, his breathing shallow. Then slowly he knelt, not out of fear, but out of something deeper, submission. Judy hesitated, then joined him. For a moment there was silence. Then a soft whisper, not in any human tongue, but one that spoke directly to their hearts. It wasn't threatening, it was sorrowful. And then the candles went out. When light returned, the book was gone. Days passed, but neither could forget. Charles began withdrawing from public life. The press called it illness, fatigue, catching up. But Judy knew better. She saw it in his eyes, the same look she had seen in Mecca. That mix of awe and terror. He spoke less, but when he did, his words were different, softer. He began questioning the rituals of power, the cold distance of the crown. "What good is authority?" he said once, "if it blinds you from the truth of those you rule." Judy found herself asking the same of justice. For years she had believed in law, in right and wrong, in verdicts and punishments. But now, when she sat alone at night, she wondered what if true justice had nothing to do with courts or kings. One stormy evening, months after Mecca, Judy received a sealed envelope from the palace. The handwriting was shaky, unmistakably his, inside a single line. "The truth calls again. Meet me where the storm first found us." Her hands trembled. She knew it meant the desert. 2 weeks later, under a silent sky, they stood once again on the sands outside Mecca. The same wind, the same whispering air. But this time they were not alone. A figure awaited them. The same shadow they had seen in the storm before. Clad in white, face hidden still as a statue. When it spoke, its voice was both ancient and kind. "You came seeking meaning," it said. "But meaning is not found in crowns or courts. It is found in surrender." Charles took a step forward. "Surrender to what?" "To truth," the voice replied. "To the one who needs no throne to reign." The king fell to his knees, tears cutting through the dust on his face. Judy felt her heart tremble. The figure turned to her. "You judged men by their deeds. Now judge yourself by your heart." She lowered her head, unable to speak. The figure extended its hand toward them. The wind howled, swirling around them, carrying with it the faint sound of countless voices, the same voices they'd heard before, now louder, clearer. It wasn't haunting anymore. It was freeing. And just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure was gone. The desert fell silent again. When they returned to London, nothing was the same. The king's speech has changed, stripped of grandeur, filled with humility. Judy's tone on her show softened. She spoke less of punishment, more of understanding. People noticed, but no one knew why. At night, They still heard the call, not as a haunting, but as a reminder, a whisper of what they had seen, what they had felt, what they now carried. They never spoke publicly about Mecca again. Some truths they knew were too sacred to be told, only lived. But those who looked closely could see it in their eyes, that quiet knowing, that solemn light, the kind that only comes from seeing something that changes everything. And sometimes late at night, when the palace windows glowed under the moon and the city slept below, King Charles would stand by the window, eyes closed, lips moving silently, a prayer, perhaps, or a memory. Judy, across the sea, would pause mid-writing, feeling it too. That same distant call, that same eternal voice. Neither sought answers anymore. They had found something greater, something that would follow them forever, unseen, unspoken, but alive.